From the Windows, Doors, and More studios, your one-stop shop for all your kitchen and bath needs. The Pat Miller Program. Whoa, 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Depend on it.
And welcome back here in the second hour, the 1 o'clock hour of the Saturday Pat Miller Program. Very glad that you guys are with us. Very glad. I don't think, and I'll ask him, because you know my memory, I'm an old man. Marlin Stutzman, formerly the 3rd District Congressman for this area and looking to be again. Marlin, I don't think I've had you on since we've had the time change.
Well, hey, Pat, it's great to be with you on WoWo. And, I guess I see where I rank compared to my wife, because I think she got to go before me.
Yes, she did. But then again, she's a Christian book bestseller. She puts out very good, rather educational, rather mentally stimulating stuff. Not that you don't, Congressman. I don't want you to take this wrong. But, yeah, she. And plus, she looks a little bit better than you. Looks a little bit better than me.
Well, that is true. Both our wives look better than us.
Oh, you got that right.
But it's great to be with you. And I'll tell you this, Pat, I really do miss you on the weekday afternoons.
Well, thank you.
But glad to be with you this Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, well, thank you very, very much. And I need to tell people now, if I haven't told them previously in the program today, if you miss anything, or if you did miss anything, you just want to hear it again, or you just want to share it with your friends, you can always go to wowo.com, click on programs, find mine, and when you click there, all 3 hours of every Saturday show in their entirety are all there, so you can click on them and you can listen to them. So for this Saturday, this would be segment 2. This would be hour 2, and we're talking to Marlin Stutzman. So you are back on the campaign trail because you are once again running for the 3rd District Congress. Now, just tell me, I know pretty much in my gut, and I've been around you enough, tell everybody why it was that you left to run for the Senate when you did, and why you've waited until now to come back.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, one of the things that, both Christy and I feel very strongly about is making sure that we're a mom and a dad first, and that our family always comes first. And when I, of course, ran for the U.S. Senate seat in 2010, came up short, but of course had the opportunity right away to serve in the House seat. And then when 2016 came around, Pat, and it's the same thing. It's probably worse now than what it was even in 2016. But there's just such a lack of vision and leadership in Washington, D.C. and Congress.
Right.
That I felt like I could make a difference in the U.S. Senate. And, of course, Mitch McConnell and his allies made sure that didn't happen back in 2016. So I had to give up my congressional seat to run for the Senate and was not successful. But now that Congressman Banks is running for the Senate seat and is going to be successful, I still feel like, I have a lot to offer that I just couldn't sit on the sidelines watching politicians in Washington, D.C. take our country a very bad direction. And ultimately, there's going to be a lot of consequences. And as I tell people, we always talk about elections being a crossroads. I feel like we're approaching a cliff. And I really do want to be there to help turn our country or turn our government around. It's not always, we always say it's our country. Well, it's really our federal government that is the problem. It's not the American people. The American people are the answer to the problem. And in spite of the leadership out of Washington, D.C., Americans still make things happen from day to day. And I'm excited to be back on the campaign trail. And I hope I have the opportunity to serve the 3rd District because we need strong leadership in Washington today.
And I know you have some internal polling that I have not seen, but it seems to me from the people that write me and call me and text me, it seems to me that at least throughout the 3rd District and a lot of counties beyond, a lot of people are pulling for a repeat of the Marlin Stutzman time in Congress.
Well, and I tell you, Pat, Christy and I, we prayed about it for a while after Congressman Banks announced that he was going to run for the Senate, and we prayed about it. But as we talked to people around the district, we just got this great response from folks that they would, want to see me back in Washington fighting for us. And that meant a lot. Politics can be a bumpy business, and of course 2016 there was a big bump in the road. But what I feel is that God really, I believe that God directs our steps if we are willing to, just follow Him and let Him lead. And so over the last 8 years, I've got to be a dad and be a baseball coach and be there for our son's important days in high school, and be at those moments that I really always that I want to be at, and not pulled away to Washington or other activities. And also, I got to help build our family businesses. That's something I've always enjoyed, is business. And so whether it's agriculture or manufacturing, we've been able to do some really neat things, creating jobs here in Northeast Indiana. That's one of the things that I saw in Washington, is how much wealth there is on the East Coast and the West Coast. And a lot of times, these private equity groups that come in with money into the Midwest, right here in Indiana, for example, Warsaw is a good example of that, with the orthopedic industry, that money comes from the East Coast, invests in companies here in the Midwest, and then the profits go back to the East Coast or somewhere else. And, I put together a group of friends and allies and business folks that want to see growth right here at home, and the money stay here, the jobs are created here. And so I got a chance to do that. And but now I feel like the opportunity, it's time again to get back in the ring and go fight in Washington.
One of the things I remember that I think came out of an interview, I think you've heard of her, Christy Stutzman. I talked with her. This is probably an interview we did about 2 years ago. And, of course, the two of you, and she's kind of, I don't want to say she's the brainchild of it, but she's kind of the face to it, of the theater, the Round Theater that you guys took over there in north central Indiana, and took a theater that was very much on the downslide and getting ready to go under. And you and she have refurbished it and made it vibrant. You have great shows coming in, great cast, great food. Your restaurant up there on the second floor there in the building next to the theater. And, of course, you feature a lot of the steaks and other things that come from Stutzman Farms. But it is an amazing place. But because you guys reached in and grabbed that, Marlon, tell me if I'm wrong, and I may be, but my understanding is there's probably 35 to 40% of the economy of the town right there where your restaurant and theater is that was saved from going under. Well,
Amish Acres is a historical staple in Napanee and northern Indiana. It's been around for 60 years, and it was done. It went up for auction. I wouldn't say my timing was good in February of 2020 to buy that with some other business partners. And COVID, made things even worse.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of revenue that was driven to Amish Acres when the previous owner owned it. It was one of the places to go back in the 90s and 2000s. And it was going to shut down, and we bought it, and it's been a real struggle, but we've turned it around. There's days I want to pull my hair out, but we've got a great team there, and that's what, I'm going to use that same experience in Washington, D.C., is that it takes leadership. It takes casting a vision and saying, this is where we want to go. And then the teammates, our team members at the Barns at Napanee are all bought in. They love the idea. They love history. And they want to see the Barns be successful, whether it's in the Round Barn Theater or whether it's in the Stutzman Brothers Steakhouse.
Yeah.
And so we've had to make some changes, but it's a great opportunity to preserve our history, to make something that was great again. And so I think there's a lot of parallels. Washington is more broken than what Amish Acres was, but we're going to need people that can turn businesses around to do the same thing in Washington and get our federal government turned around.
I remember the first time we came there for a show up at Amish Acres, now the Round Barn Theater, and I remember we pulled in, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't even remember what the production was. I just remember the place was packed. But when we pulled in about 2 hours before the show, because we were going to go up and have dinner in the theater, in the restaurant, and then come back down to the theater, and as we're pulling in, we're actually way out in the grass to the east of the theater, because you're parking people way out to make sure everybody gets in. And as we come in, I pass one of your sons and I wave at him. But then when we pull in a little further, I see a guy up there actually directing me into my parking place. And I told Kim, I said, okay, how bad is a theater really if they can afford to have a former congressman of the United States out here directing traffic. So,
They were looking pretty low on the totem pole to find somebody to go out and park cars.
but yeah, what I'll tell you though, it is incredible. Yours is a family that I have seen. This is not a political statement. This is just a dad to a dad. It's incredible to see a family willing to pull together to the extent that Christy and you, and then both of your sons did, because teenage boys have other things to do on a weekend. But to see them there and to see them part, I never go there. At least one of them isn't there doing something of work and service and all that, and your mom and dad are thrown in too. Marlon, real quick question for you here. What is it, I've only got about 3 minutes left, but what is it that you're hoping a return of Marlon Stutzman to the Congress can accomplish for the 3rd District? Is there a lot to be said about the fact that you know the 3rd and the 3rd knows you? And not only that, but when you hit the ground running in D.C., you already know how the cabbage is cut?
Yeah, that makes a big difference, Pat. I was there for 6 years, and I know where the bathrooms are. I know who the players are, and I didn't get sucked into the swamp either. What I think is desperately needed in Washington, and this is what I'm just so proud to be from northeastern Indiana, because what we have in our neck of the woods is we have leaders who get jobs done. And that's something that needs to be done in Washington as well, is we need leaders who get the job done. We have a lot of people who know how to talk in Washington, but they don't know how to get the job done.
Yep.
And that's why Donald Trump's so popular, because, he talks and tells people what he's going to do, and then he does it. And that's what people are looking for, is people that are willing to go and get the job done, and rather than just being another politician that makes promises and doesn't fulfill their promises.
Let me put you way on the fence here. I will tell you that I think one of the biggest things that we need to look at right now is the border. We have all become border states. We have now had people robbed and killed in Indiana by somebody who's here illegally, so it has come to us. Looking at the immigration problem that we have, Congressman, what is one of the first things that you would like to see accomplished if you're there in Congress, if Jim Banks is in the Senate, and if Donald Trump is returned to the White House? What is one of the main things that we need to get accomplished with our border?
We got to finish the wall. There's no reason to do anything else, Pat. If you don't have, it's kind of like, out on the farm. If the fence isn't done, the horses are going to get out. The cows are going to get out. If we don't finish the wall, people are going to continue to come across the border, and we don't know who they are, where they're coming from. And that's why the border is so important. And, I understand why people want to come to America. This is the greatest place on earth to live. But we have to have law and order, and that's why you got to finish the wall. I was down in Yuma, Arizona a couple of months ago, and saw the unfinished wall. It's as Trump said, he's going to build a beautiful wall. He did. But then you get to the end by the Colorado River, and there's a couple of concrete barriers that people just jump over and come around and sit on the border road and wait for Border Patrol to pick them up, or they just walk on in. And they come in without any ID. It's just a travesty what's happening. And women are raped at the border as part of their final payment to be brought to the border to come to the United States. Children are coming without their parents. They don't know where their parents or family are. It's a humanitarian crisis. And so if we don't finish the wall, it's pointless on doing a lot of other things, because we have to control the border. I've always said, Pat, we need a high wall, and then we need a wide gate that we control who's coming in and going out of the country.
I think you're right. Congressman Banks, for your time today, sir. Thank you very much. Here we are on Saturday between Good Friday and Easter, and I know your family as well as ours, it means a great deal to you. So blessings to you as we're finishing up Holy Week tomorrow. I pray that the Stutzman family has an incredible day, including your mom and dad up in Michigan, where they have peaches. I'm just saying that. I'm hoping she can hear me say that. She might not be listening, but, because you're on there, it's rather sycophantic. She's probably listening. So.
Well, no, thank you, Pat, and wish you and Kim a happy Easter as well. It's a wonderful time of the year, and looking forward to this next roughly 40 days through the campaign, and I'm hope to have the chance to talk to you and see you soon.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, sir.
This is the Pat Miller Program on WoWo, 92.3 FM and 1190 AM, and on the WoWo app.
Hey, welcome back. It is the Pat Miller Program. Very, very glad that you're with us. We're glad to have you here as we continue to roll through this Saturday. Thanks to Marlon Stutzman for being willing to be on with us this morning. Here's one of the problems that I think that Democrats are rolling into. Let's talk about this for a minute. Can we do that? Here's one of the problems that they're rolling into. They're stuck with Joe Biden. Voters don't think much of President Biden, but they are very scary. They're wary. They're leery of his obvious replacement. The bad news is that according to Real Clear Politics, and this is bothering the White House like crazy, Joe Biden remains as unpopular as he was before giving his State of the Union address. There was no State of the Union bounce for Joe Biden coming out of the State of the Union. That's almost unheard of. The worst news for the Democrats is he's not bouncing back, and there's nothing they can do about it. That's their big problem. Let me give you a little bit of a caveat that polling is not an exact science, if it's even a science, but assume a wide margin for error in this electorate, and it's still very unhappy with the incumbent. In other words, if you go beyond margins of error, if you go beyond, but it was that poll was taken on a Wednesday and it was 72 degrees, all the stuff they find into these polls, you look at all of it, it's still not good for Joe Biden. This week, the Economist poll finds that 58% of registered voters don't want Mr. Biden to run again this fall, compared to just 31% who do. Now, when you talk about how many points Trump is ahead of Biden, if you go with the 58-31, he's 27% behind himself. He's got a gap of that many, 58 to 31, who don't want him to be president again versus the 31 who do. And even among Democrats, the percentage who want Mr. Biden running again is just 50%. Now, this is in spite of the fact that he has recently locked up the nomination to represent their party this fall. A full 63% of registered voters regard him as a weak leader compared to the 37% who view him as a strong one. In another reading that can't be good for Biden, when asked if they feel that things in this country are better these days, if they're under control or out of control, only 15% of registered voters, both parties, 15% of registered voters said that things in the country seem to be under control, while 70% said they feel that things in this country are in fact out of control. Looks like an overwhelming endorsement of the thesis advanced by several people there in D.C., and that's this. Mr. Biden has failed to fulfill the central premise, the central promise of his 2020 campaign, a return to normal politics. Meanwhile, there's more discouraging news for the Democrats in the latest Harvard-Harris poll, which finds that most voters doubt Joe Biden's mental fitness to serve another term as president, and they believe that he's showing that he's too old for the job. And in that was an interesting one, because in that particular survey, it wasn't too old just by a number. It was too old by how he functioned, how he acted, and his ability to decide how it was he can conduct his job. If Joe Biden decided to drop out of the Democratic convention in August, do you view Kamala Harris as the default replacement, or would you want an open contest at the convention among the delegates? Well, that's quite a question. How do you feel about the vice president you put into office now having to take over? Only 37% respondents say the vice president should be the default selection, while 63% want it to be an open contest. They don't like Biden. They certainly don't want Kamala Harris. Now, Republicans overwhelmingly favor an open contest, so perhaps they're just kind of rooting around for uncontrolled division in the rival party. But 70% of independents also favor an open contest. That's quite a lot. That's no small thing. A bit more of that we're going to cover more here after the bottom of the hour, moving straight ahead. Thank you very much on this Holy Week, being with us on this day placed between Good Friday and Easter. I hope you're having and going to have a terrific time with your family, with your church family. We will talk more about all of this as we move ahead. Thank you very much for being here with us on this Saturday. As always, from noon to 3, this is Pat Miller with you here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM. Hi, everybody. Welcome back here on this Saturday. Very glad you're with us. And I mean that. Thank you so very much that you take the time in the middle of your weekend to find us. Now, what if you can't? What if you missed the show? What if you say, oh my gosh, that was today and we were at the picnic or whatever and we missed it? Not a problem. Just go to WOWO.com. That's WOWO.com. Click on programs. Go down to Pat Miller Program and you click it and you can find us right there and you can listen to each hour or all 3 hours, whatever it is you need. You can find it for every edition of the Pat Miller Program right there on your cell phone. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., RFK Jr., all the different ways they're referring to him, can he make a difference in 2024? He's completing what has so far been the highest polling independent presidential ticket in more than 30 years. Well, who was it back then? Ross Perot. Not since Ross Perot ran for president in the year 1992 has a candidate polled as well for the White House without a major party affiliation. Perot even led former President George H.W. Bush and his eventual Democratic successor, then Bill Clinton, the governor of Arkansas, head-to-head at one point. Now, Kennedy's numbers have a much wider range when you look at them. The longtime activist and son of the former Attorney General Bobby Kennedy, senator and the 1968 Democratic presidential candidate, ranges from a high of 15% nationally, that was in a recent Harvard-Harris poll, to 2% in an Economist YouGov survey, both released this month. He stands at 9.9% in the Real Clear Politics polling average. Perot received 19% of the vote in 1992 and followed up with 8% in 1996, then as nominee of the Reform Party. The Harvard-Harris poll looked somewhat like the 1992 final results, with the Democrat and the Republican reversed, but not the incumbent and the challenger. Over 3 decades ago, Clinton finished first with 43% of the popular vote to Bush's 38%. This time around, the aforementioned survey has former President Donald Trump at 43% and President Joe Biden at 38%. So they're the same numbers but reversed by party. It was Clinton at 43, now it's Donald Trump at 43. Then it was Bush at 38, and the incumbent Joe Biden now at 38. Now, Clinton won north of 300 electoral votes in 1992. Perot did not carry a single state, though he finished second in both Maine and Utah. In Maine, he came in after Clinton but ahead of Bush. In Utah, he came in after Bush but ahead of Clinton. It's not clear how many ballots Kennedy will appear on, though he vows it will be all 50 states plus the District of Columbia, which is the same promise that Perot made. That's my promise to you. It's easier to be seen than heard. Yeah, that was Perot. Look, there are also questions about the debates. When Perot appeared on the debate stage alongside Clinton and Bush, he won nearly a fifth of the national vote. When he was excluded from the debates 4 years later, he dropped to below 10%. The only other time that I can find that a 3rd district candidate debated a major party nominee was when John Anderson, do you remember him? Some of you that are even astutely connected politically don't remember John Anderson. He's the one that took on Ronald Reagan in 1980. President Carter, the incumbent, sat it out and then debated Reagan one-on-one. This year, there is no guarantee that Biden and Trump will debate each other, much less Kennedy. Look, Trump has called for debates against Biden but boycotted all the Republican National Committee sanctioned debates against his 2024 primary opponents, creating a precedent some believe will be invoked to justify the 81-year-old incumbent skipping them. Perot did well in the 92 debates, partially overcoming voters' concerns about how he dropped out of the race, claiming Republicans were going to disrupt his daughter's wedding. This is just, I remember this stuff and I don't. But Republicans were going to go in and disrupt his daughter's wedding and equally abruptly re-entered it, which doesn't even make sense. At the time, they began to laugh at him a little bit and say, okay, you see a boogie hiding behind every wedding cake? I mean, what is this? But that's what he did. Kennedy's spasmodic dysphonia, an unusual voice disorder that he has, would be another question mark on the debate stage. Even with all this uncertainty, third-party candidates with less support than Perot have arguably affected the outcome of presidential elections before. Green Party nominee Ralph Nader, oh, please let it go, received less than 3% nationally in 2000, significantly less than the margin between Al Gore and George W. Bush, who lost the popular vote but won the election. Nader's impact was strongest in Florida, where he failed to crack 2% of the vote, but the Consumer Advocate's 97,488 easily exceeded the 537 votes by which Bush won the state, securing the Electoral College majority and the presidency. Then in 2016, Libertarian Party nominee Gary Johnson won 3.3% of the vote nationally, but the Green Party's Jill Stein, who won just 1.07%, was seen as having a bigger effect. How can that be? How can you get 1.07% and that's more effective than 3.3% by somebody else? Well, it's because most of her votes were believed to have come at Hillary Clinton's expense in the key battleground states, especially as Trump turned the Rust Belt red for the first time since the 1980s. The drop-off in third-party vote totals from 2016 to 2020 was believed by many analysts to be a contributing factor to Biden's election. So it's not entirely evident which major party nominee stands to lose the most from Kennedy in this particular run. At the moment, it appears to be Biden. Trump does slightly better in polls, including Kennedy and other third-party candidates. But Stein, who is running again this year, who keeps funding people like this? Okay, look, Jill Stein isn't going to go anywhere, but she keeps running. Cornel West, clearly candidates of the left. While that is where Kennedy's background is, some of his appeal on vaccines and media bias could draw support from the right. This includes some former backers of Governor Ron DeSantis, who did not like Trump's approach to COVID-19. Republicans often boosted Kennedy when he was planning to run against Biden in the Democratic primaries instead. Kennedy is nevertheless an afterthought. Bobby Kennedy Jr. is an afterthought in much of the campaign coverage. The major parties are poised to renominate the sitting president and the previous one. They're going to renominate Biden and Trump, who both generate an awful lot of headlines on their own. Many working political journalists have never covered a semi-serious independent or third-party campaign, and Kennedy is widely viewed as eccentric. But the unpopularity of Biden and Trump, who both poll below 50% in terms of favorability, creates this market for a third candidate. In the absence of a successful no-labels recruiting push, Kennedy appears to be the third best-known candidate. No third-party or independent candidate has won a state or an electoral vote other than from a faithless elector since George Wallace in 1968. It's been a while, and you have to believe it's not going to happen this time either. We're going to be back with more straight ahead. Glad you're with us, and we continue to move on. Don't forget, Philip Wegman comes up with us right after the news at the top of the hour, and then after that, Philip Wegman from Real Clear Politics. He's our inside guy inside the Beltway. He's the White House correspondent there for Real Clear. Real Clear has some great articles, and they have some fantastic polls. We'll do all that, talk to him after the top of the hour. This all comes up straight ahead on this Saturday. here with you. This is Pat Miller here on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM.
This is the Pat Miller Program on WOWO 92.3 FM and 1190 AM and at WOWO.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Pat Miller here with you on Saturday here on WOWO. Remember, you can text me while I'm here. That's Pat Miller, all one word, no dots or dashes. Pat Miller at WOWO.com for your email. For your text message, just go to WOWO and click on our way to get here, or you can get on your phone at 46862. That's 46862. If you text the word WOWO first, then your question or comment, and it comes to us right here in the studio. A Michigan woman has been murdered by an illegal immigrant, she 25. Thanks to this ongoing, ever-approaching, ever-falling, ever-cascading disaster of the Joe Biden open border and his surreptitious shipping of illegal immigrants all over the country, every American state now is, in fact, a border state. Even Indiana. We've had some problems in our state with illegals. This is, look, say what you want. The president, Trump, when he was president, wanted things different and done. That's how he wanted it. Biden has done things completely different, but then tries to blame the president, the previous president, when things happen. Rachel Maddow is a nut job, and she's saying, in quoting Press Secretary Andrew Bates, Joe Biden won't let congressional Republicans defund the police, abolish law enforcement agencies like the FBI, gut crime prevention and enforcement agencies like the FBI, or roll back landmark legislation critical to the fight against gun crime. What party has been doing that? Has that not been the Republicans? This is their new campaign, folks. Get ready for it. This is what it is. Name everything that's wrong in the country, even if it's more wrong than it was, because of the actions of Joe Biden, and then say, well, that's what the Republicans did. That is not what the Republicans did. All this garbage, that unemployment now is much higher than, or much lower than it was in unemployment, and it's much better than it was when my predecessor was in. It's a lie. It's an absolute bold-faced lie. And nobody will call him out on it, especially not his own party, especially not the people in the media who are basically in his own party. They won't do it. Andrew Bates said violent crime surged under President Biden's predecessor, but this president immediately fought back and has now reversed that trend with a historic reduction in crime. Where? Are you going to a specific suburb in New York City instead of New York City as a whole? Are you going to some northwest, well-heeled, behind-the-gates community up in northwest Chicago rather than all of Chicago, including the south of Chicago? Where is all this happening? This historic reduction in crime. It's not along the border. I can tell you that. Bates says Biden took unprecedented action to hire waves of police officers and invest in effective crime reduction strategies. Name one. Name one strategy that the president has done relative to the hiring or the backing of police officers that is reducing our crime anywhere in this country. Tell me where that happens. I don't see it anywhere. Do you? I don't see it anywhere. And I'm desperately trying to find it. Well, now we have this woman, 25 years of age, murdered by an illegal immigrant, and nowhere was this grim reality more apparent than in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's 1,400 miles from the southern border. It is much less mileage from Fort Wayne. And yet now mourns the loss of a young lady, Ruby Garcia, apparently at the hands of this murdering Mexican illegal. Michigan State Police began investigating Garcia's murder when her body was discovered on a well-traveled highway Friday night with apparent gunshot wounds. As Just the News reports, an illegal immigrant who once lived in the country as a DACA recipient before he was deported in 2020 was arrested over the weekend as a suspect in the slaying of a 25-year-old Michigan woman. According to local TV stations, Kent County records show the suspect, Brandon Ortiz Vite, a Mexican citizen, was booked on March the 24th by Michigan State Police 2 days after the murder, which was charged with operating a motor vehicle with a suspended license, operating a vehicle while intoxicated. Ruby Garcia now joins the likes of Molly Tibbetts, Melissa and Reardon Powell, Laken Riley, Mr. President, say her name, Laken Riley, in an infuriating, expanding list of Americans who would be alive today if it were not for the willful, and I do mean willful, refusal by this president to perform his most fundamental duty as the American president, and that is enforcing our laws. James Carville, this is a blast from the past. It'd be good for him if he would just stay there. When I look at Biden's polling numbers, it's like walking in on your grandma naked. You can't get the image out of your mind. In other words, he can't believe we're where we are. He just can't believe it. John Kennedy, this is not the Kennedy that's running for president. This is John Kennedy, the Republican senator from Louisiana. He said, if we discovered life on Mars tomorrow, Joe Biden would send it money. I think his only plan is to put a reverse mortgage on Alaska and just keep spending. Tom Cotton from Arkansas, one of my favorite guys, by the way. Tom Cotton says it's disgraceful that Biden's entire electoral strategy relies on his Department of Justice prosecuting Donald Trump. That's more befitting of a banana republic than it is a free America. And isn't that the truth? I mean, that really, really is the truth. And how it is that we get there and we just keep on boiling down all that is beyond me. It's crazy, absolutely crazy, and a little bit nutty. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink is a leftist, an elitist, and a globalist, but he didn't get rich by ignoring the forces that move people's minds. That's why exactly this titan of the meddlesome environmental, social, government, business movement is now having some second thoughts. The climate change-focused investment strategy known as ESG suffered another blow Tuesday at the hands of someone who was once its biggest steward on Wall Street. Larry Fink, the BlackRock CEO, called for energy pragmatism in his annual letter to investors. He said that consists of using clean energy to reduce global warming emissions while relying on fossil fuels for energy security. Let me translate all that for you. Fink doesn't want to get run over by the fossil fuel freight train. That's the bottom line. This language, as the Time reports, is a significant departure from his years of staunch advocacy for ESG. As Fink himself explained, he goes, now the demand for clean energy is being amplified by something else, a focus on energy security. I'm hearing more leaders talk about decarbonization and energy security together under the joint banner of what you might call energy pragmatism. It seems one man's drill baby drill is another man's energy pragmatism. Probably a lot of truth to that. It's going to be amazing to see how all this continues to play out, especially in an election year, because normally sometimes politicians try to run and hide from this stuff. It's going to be a little hard to run and hide when you are within months of the actual election, and that could be a great big problem for them. And Kennedy, the Kennedy running for president, sits out there in the wings and creates a Ross Perot moment for Joe Biden, which is not a good thing. You know, his wife is supposedly a good right-hand man, and she's there to help him, but she's spending too much time picking him up off platforms before he falls and hurts himself. That's where we're at. Going to be back in the third hour here, coming up straight ahead, right after the news at the top of the hour. I'm going to be talking with Philip Wegman from Real Clear Politics, and we'll talk to him about all of the goings-on in and around the Beltway. That all comes up straight ahead after the news. This is Pat Miller here on WOWO 92.3 FM, 1190 AM.
podcasts by Federated Media.